Okay. I think I got it now. I have to change the title. One moment. What was it? What was it? What was it? Right. Let's see. Okay. I hope that's all right now. Hi. I'm that peanut. I'm so sorry about that, everyone. Okay, seems to be working now. I don't know what happened. I did copy the stream key. Yeah. What happened was, Peanut. I was streaming on YouTube, but I wasn't streaming on Twitch. I was trying to do both at the same time. Even though I did put in that restream.io stream key on Streamlabs, it just don't know. I have no explanation. Anyway, I'll give it a few moments for some people to come on to here. I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for asking. How about you? Popped up on your drop down. Okay. I'm going to put you on Bluetooth so you can take a shower and listen. Okay, not a problem. There's so many people coming on at once. Oh, you mean like the other scam baiters, Peanut? Ah, I got ya. Okay, might as well start here. Let's see, just close some of the tabs. Finally caught a ball string the other day. Funny guy. Oh yeah, he is. Alright, I will... Okay, I will start... I will put my game display screen back on and then start playing... Excuse me. Start reading some stories. Right. Let me just... On holiday. Oh no, it's just that it's one of my day offs. Right, there we go. Right. How's the audio? How about the music? Is that okay? Not too loud or too quiet? Oh, very faint. Okay, how's that? Better? Alright then. I'll start with reading A Visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Clark Moore. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. A mamma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave a lustre of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment he must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. as leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot. All his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know that I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." The end. Hi, Spyro. Nice to have you here. How are you? Yeah, I did have trouble earlier where Twitch wasn't streaming at the same time as I was streaming on YouTube with Restream. So I don't know if the live link would be different, like on YouTube. I'm just checking. Yeah, well, it doesn't matter anyway. So yeah, happy to know that you're well. Oh, hi Sandra. How are you? Right. We'll go on to another Christmas story. That's great, Sandra. You're welcome. Let's see. I'll try the fir tree. Okay, this seems like a good one. Let's see. The Fir Tree, A Christmas Story by Hans Christian Andersen. Far down in the forest, where the warm sun and the fresh air made a sweet resting place, grew a pretty little fir tree, and yet it was not happy. It wished so much to be tall like its companions, the pines and firs which grew around it. The sun shone, and the soft air flooded its leaves, and the little peasant children passed by, prattling merrily, but the fir tree heeded them not. Sometimes the children would bring a large basket of raspberries or strawberries, wreathed on the straw, and seat themselves near the fir tree, and say, "Is it not a pretty little tree?" which made it feel more unhappy than before. And yet all this while the tree grew a notch or joint taller every year. For by the number of joints in the stem of a fir tree we can discover its age. Still, as it grew, it complained, "Oh, how I wish I were as tall as the other trees. Then I would spread out my branches on every side, and my top would overlook the wide world. I should have the birds building their nests on my boughs, and when the wind blew, I should bow with stately dignity like my tall companions." Oh, really, a Peanut? Just a moment, everyone. Let's pause. There we go. Thank you very much for that, Peanut. I never realised that until you told me. Thank you. Alright, we'll carry on now. Thank you again, Peanut. The tree was so discontented that it took no pleasure in the warm sunshine, the birds, or the rosy clouds that floated over it morning and evening. Sometimes in winter, when the snow lay white and glittering on the ground. Oh, I got a notification. Oh, thank you, Helen, for resubscribing for 4 months in a row. Much appreciated. Hello, my friends in Sonic 7 1991. Hello, hello. Sometimes in winter, when the snow lay white and glittering on the ground, a hare would come springing along and jump right over the little tree, and then how mortified it would feel. 2 winters passed, and when the third arrived, the tree had grown so tall that the hare was obliged to run around it. Yet it remained unsatisfied, and would exclaim, "Oh, if I could but keep on growing tall and old, there is nothing else worth caring for in the world." In the autumn, as usual, the woodcutters came and cut down several of the tallest trees, and the young fir tree, which was now grown to its full height, shuddered as the noble trees fell to the earth with a crash. After the branches were lopped off, the trunks looked so slender and bare that they could scarcely be recognized. Then they were placed upon wagons and drawn by horses out of the forest. Where were they going? What would become of them? The young fir tree wished very much to know. So in the spring, when the swallows and the storks came, it asked, "Do you know where those trees were taken? Did you meet them?" The swallows knew nothing, but the stork, after a little reflection, nodded his head and said, "Yes, I think I do. I met several new ships when I flew from Egypt, and they had fine masts that smelt like fir. I think these must have been the trees. I assure you they were stately, very stately." "Oh, how I wish I were tall enough to go on the sea," said the fir tree. "What is the sea, and what does it look like?" "It would take too much time to explain," said the stork, flying quickly away. "Rejoice in thy youth," said the sunbeam. "Rejoice in thy fresh growth, and the young life that is in thee." And the wind kissed the tree, and the dew watered it with tears, but the fir tree regarded them not. Christmas time drew near, and many young trees were cut down, some even smaller and younger than the fir tree, who enjoyed neither rest nor peace with longing to leave its forest home. These young trees, which were chosen for their beauty, kept their branches, and were also laid on wagons and drawn by horses out of the forest. "Where are they going?" asked the fir tree. "They are not taller than I am. Indeed, one is much less. And why are the branches not cut off?" "Where are they going?" We know," sang the sparrows. We have looked in at the windows of the houses in the town, and we know what is done with them. They are dressed up in the most splendid manner. We have seen them standing in the middle of a warm room and adorned with all sorts of beautiful things, honey cakes, gilded apples, playthings, and many hundreds of wax tapers." "And then," asked the fir tree, trembling through all its branches, "and then what happens?" "We did not see it any more," said the sparrows, "but this was enough for us. I wonder whether anything so brilliant will ever happen to me," thought the fir tree. "It would be much better than crossing the sea. I long for it almost with pain. Oh, when will Christmas be here?" I am now as tall and well grown as those which were taken away last year. Oh, that I were now laid on the wagon, or standing in the warm room, with all that brightness and splendour around me. Something better and more beautiful is to come after, or the trees would not be so decked out. Yes, what follows will be grander and more splendid. What can it be? I am weary with longing. I scarcely know how I feel. Weary with longing, sorry. I'm weary with longing. I scarcely know how I feel. Rejoice with us, said the air and the sunlight. Enjoy thine own bright life in the fresh air. But the tree would not rejoice, though it grew taller every day, and winter and summer, its dark green foliage might be seen in the forests, while passers-by would say, "What a beautiful tree!" A short time before Christmas, the discontented fir tree was the first to fall. As the axe cut through the stem and divided the pith, the tree fell with a groan to the earth, conscious of pain and faintness, and forgetting all its anticipations of happiness in sorrow at leaving its home in the forest. It knew that it should never again see its dear old companions, the trees, nor the little bushes and many-coloured flowers that had grown by its side, perhaps not even the birds. Neither was the journey at all pleasant. The tree first recovered itself while being unpacked in the courtyard of a house, with several other trees, and it heard a man say, "We only want one, and this is the prettiest." Then came two servants in grand livery, and carried the fir tree into a large and beautiful apartment. On the walls hung pictures, and near the great stove stood great china vases, with lions on the lids. There were rocking chairs, silken sofas, large tables, covered with pictures, books and playthings, worth a great deal of money, at least the children said so. Then the fir tree was placed in a large tub full of sand, but green baize hung all around it, so that no one could see it was a tub, and it stood on a very handsome carpet. How the fir tree trembled! What was going to happen to him now? Some young ladies came, and the servants helped them to adorn the tree. On one branch they hung little bags cut out of coloured paper, and each bag was filled with sweetmeats. From other branches hung gilded apples and walnuts, as if they had grown there, and above and all around were hundreds of red, blue and white tapers, which were fastened on the branches. Dolls, exactly like real babies, were placed under the green leaves. The tree had never seen such things before, and at the very top was fastened a glittering star made of tinsel. Oh, it was very beautiful. "This evening," they all exclaimed, "how bright it will be." Oh, that the evening were come, thought the tree, and the tapers lighted. Then I shall know what else is going to happen. Will the trees of the forest come to see me? I wonder if the sparrows will peep in at the windows as they fly? Shall I grow faster here and keep on all these ornaments summer and winter? But guessing was of very little use. It made his bark ache, and this pain is as bad for a slender fir tree as headache is for us. At last the tapers were lighted, and then what a glistening blaze of light the tree presented. It trembled so with joy in all its branches that one of the candles fell among the green leaves and burnt some of them. "Help! Help!" exclaimed the young ladies. But there was no danger, for they quickly extinguished the fire. After this, the tree tried not to tremble at all, though the fire frightened him. He was so anxious not to hurt any of the beautiful ornaments, even while their brilliancy dazzled him. And now the folding doors were thrown open, and a troop of children rushed in as if they intended to upset the tree. They were followed more silently by their elders. For a moment the little ones stood silent with astonishment, and then they shouted for joy till the room rang, and they danced merrily round the tree, while one present after another was taken from it. "What are they doing? What will happen next?" thought the fir. At last the candles burnt down to the branches and were put out. Then the children received permission to plunder the tree. Oh, how they rushed upon it, till the branches cracked, and had it not been fastened with a glistening star to the ceiling, it must have been thrown down. The children then danced about with their pretty toys, and no one noticed the tree except the children's maid, who came and peeped among the branches to see if an apple or a fig had been forgotten. A story, cried the children, pulling a little fat man towards the tree. "Now we shall be in the green shade," said the man, as he seated himself under it, "and the tree will have the pleasure of hearing also, but I shall only relate one story. What shall it be?" If Day, or Humpty Dumpty, who fell downstairs, but soon got up again, and at last married a princess. Every day, cried some. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Anyway, Humpty Dumpty, cried others, and there was a fine shouting and crying out. But the fir tree remained quite still, and thought to himself, "Shall I have anything to do with all this?" But he had already amused them as much as they wished. Then the old man told them the story of Humpty Dumpty, how he fell downstairs and was raised up again, and married a princess. And the children clapped their hands and cried, "Tell another, tell another," for they wanted to hear the story of Day, but they only had Humpty Dumpty. After this, the fir tree became quite silent and thoughtful. Never had the birds in the forest told such tales as Humpty Dumpty, who fell downstairs and yet married a princess. Ah, yes, so it happens in the world, thought the fir tree. He believed it all, because it was related by such a nice man. Ah, well, he thought, who knows? Perhaps I may fall down too and marry a princess. And he looked forward joyfully to the next evening, expecting to be again decked out with lights and playthings, golden fruit. Tomorrow I will not tremble, thought he. I will enjoy all my splendour, and I shall hear the story of Humpty Dumpty again, and perhaps every day. And the tree remained quiet and thoughtful all night. In the morning the servants and the housemaid came in. Now, thought the fir, all my splendour is going to begin again, but they dragged him out of the room and upstairs to the garret, and threw him on the floor in a dark corner where no daylight shone. There they left him. What does this mean, thought the tree. What am I to do here? I can hear nothing in a place like this. And he had time enough to think, for days and nights passed, and no one came near him. And when at last somebody did come, it was only to put away large boxes in the corner. so the tree was completely hidden from sights as if it had never existed. It is winter now, thought the tree. The ground is hard and covered with snow, so that people cannot plant me. I shall be sheltered here, I dare say, until spring comes. How thoughtful and kind everybody is to me. Still, I wish this place were not so dark, as well as lonely, with not even a little hare to look at. How pleasant it was out in the forest while the snow lay on the ground, when the hare would run by, yes, and jump over me too, although I did not like it then. Oh, it is terrible lonely here. Squeak, squeak, said a little mouse, creeping cautiously towards the tree. Then came another, and they both sniffed at the fir tree and crept between the branches. Oh, it is very cold, said the little mouse. Or else we should be so comfortable here, shouldn't we, you old fir tree? I am not old, said the fir tree. There are many who are older than I am. Where do you come from, and what do you know? Asked the mice, who were full of curiosity. Have you seen the most beautiful places in the world? And can you tell us all about them? And have you been in the storeroom, where cheeses lie on the shelf, and hams hang from the ceiling? One can run about on tallow candles there, and go in thin and come out fat. I know nothing of that place, said the fir tree, but I know the wood where the sun shines and the birds sing. And then the tree told the little mice all about its youth. They had never heard such an account in their lives, and after they had listened to it attentively, they said, What a number of things you have seen! You must have been very happy. Happy! Exclaimed the fir tree. And then, as he reflected upon what he had been telling them, he said, Ah, yes, after all, those were happy days. But when he went on and related all about Christmas Eve, and now he had been dressed up with cakes and lights, the mice said, How happy you must have been, you old fir tree. I am not old at all, replied the tree. I only came from the forest this winter, and now checked in my growth. What splendid stories you can relate, said the little mice. And the next night 4 other mice came with them to hear what the tree had to tell. The more he talked, the more he remembered, and then he thought to himself, Those were happy days, but they may come again. Humpty Dumpty fell down the stairs, and yet he married the princess. Perhaps I may marry a princess too. And the fir tree thought of the pretty little birch tree that grew in the forest, which was to him a real beautiful princess. Who is Humpty Dumpty? Asked the little mice, and then the tree related the whole story. He could remember every single word, and the little mice was so delighted with it that they were ready to jump to the top of the tree. The next night a great many more mice made their appearance, and on Sunday 2 rats came with them, but they said it was not a pretty story at all, and the little mice were very sorry, for it made them also think less of it. Do you know only one story? Asked the rats. Only one, replied the fir tree. I heard it on the happiest evening of my life, but I did not know I was so happy at the time. We think it is a very miserable story, said the rats. Don't you know any story about bacon or tallow in the storeroom? No, replied the tree. Many thanks to you then, replied the rats, and they marched off. The little mice also kept away after this, and the tree sighed and said, It was very pleasant when the merry little mice sat round me and listened while I talked. Now that is all past too. However, I shall consider myself happy when someone comes to take me out of this place. But would this ever happen? Yes, one morning people came to clear out the garret. The boxes were packed away, and the tree was pulled out of the corner and thrown roughly on the garret floor. Then the servant dragged it out upon the staircase where the sunlight shone. Now life is beginning again, said the tree, rejoicing in the sunshine and fresh air. Then it was carried downstairs and taken into the courtyard so quickly that it forgot to think of itself, and could only look about. There was so much to be seen. The court was close to a garden, where everything looked blooming. Fresh and fragrant roses hung over the little palings. The linden trees were in blossom, while the swallows flew here and there, crying, "Twit, twit, twit, my mate is coming." But it was not the fir tree they meant. "Now I shall live," cried the tree, joyfully spreading out its branches. But alas, they were all withered and yellow, and it lay in a corner amongst weeds and nettles. The star of gold paper still stuck in the top of the tree and glittered in the sunshine. In the same courtyard, 2 of the merry children were playing, who had danced round the tree at Christmas and had been so happy. The youngest saw the gilded star and ran and pulled it off the tree. "Look what is sticking to the ugly old fir trees," said the child, treading on the branches till they crackled under its boots. And the tree saw all the fresh bright flowers in the garden, and then looked at itself and wished it had remained in the dark corner of the garret. It thought of its fresh youth in the forest, of the merry Christmas evening, and of the little mice who had listened to the story of Humpty Dumpty. "Past, past," said the old tree. "Oh, had I but enjoyed myself while I could have done so, but now it is too late." Then a lad came and chopped the tree into small pieces, till a large bundle lay in a heap on the ground. The pieces were placed in the fire under the copper, and they quickly blazed up brightly, while the tree sighed so deeply that each sigh was like a pistol shot. Then the children who were at play came and seated themselves in front of the fire, and looked at it and cried, "Pop, pop," but at each pop, which was a deep sigh, the tree was thinking of a summer day in the forest, and of Christmas evening, and of Humpty Dumpty, the only story it had ever heard or knew how to relate, till at last it was consumed. The boys still played in the garden, and the youngest wore the golden star on his breast, with which the tree had been adorned during the happiest evening of its existence. Now all was past, the tree's life was past, and the story also, for all stories must come to an end at last. The end. Oh, that was quite sad, actually. I love your Christmas story readings. They feel so cozy and traditional. Thank you, Aspiro. I love reading these. Hi, Rosa. Hi, Care Bear. Yeah, it was very sad, Helen. Thank you, Rosa. Let's see. No? The greatest gift. Okay. Thank you very much, Kerban. You're welcome. Thank you, Helen. Let's see. Okay, I might read The Greatest Gift by Philip Van Doren Stern. When he found himself unable to find a publisher for his story, author Philip Van Doren Stern printed up copies of the Greatest Gift and gave them out as Christmas cards in 1943. Eventually, the story came to the attention of director Frank Capra, who explained later, "It was a story I had been looking for all my life. A good man, ambitious, but so busy helping others. Life seems to pass him by. Through the eyes of a guardian angel, he sees the world as it would have been had he not been born." Wow, what an idea. Capra went on to turn Stern's story into the cherished holiday classic, It's a Wonderful Life. Released in 1946 and starring James Stewart, Donna Reed, Lionel Barrymore and Gloria Graham, the film received several Academy Award nominations and has gone on to become one of the most iconic films in movie history, as well as a beloved feature of every holiday season. Here, presented for your enjoyment, is the original Philip Van Doren Stern story. Happy holidays all. The Greatest Gift by Philip Van Doren Stern. Oh, just a moment, I'm reading the messages from Twitch. Thank you so much. This year has been sad for me and family. That doesn't seem Christmas to me. With this story so nice, thanks. I'm absolutely sorry, Rosa. So I just need to change something quickly on my message box. One moment. Hello, I'm back. Hi Joshua. I'm good, thank you. How are you? Yeah, as long as we're there together. can make it a special Christmas for all of us. Doing great. I'm sorry I haven't been on. No, you're fine, Joshua. I haven't live streamed on YouTube for quite a while. All right. The Greatest Gift by Philip Van Doren Stern. The little town straggling up the hill was bright with coloured Christmas lights, but George Pratt did not see them. He was leaning over the railing of the iron bridge, staring down moodily at the black water. The current eddied and swirled like liquid glass, and occasionally a bit of ice detached from the shore would go gliding downstream to be swallowed up in the shadows. The water looked paralysingly cold. George wondered how long a man could stay alive in it. The glassy blackness had a strange hypnotic effect on him. He leaned still farther over the railing. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," a quiet voice beside him said. George turned resentfully to a man he had never seen before. He was stout, well past middle age, and his round cheeks were ink in the winter air, as though they had just been shaved. "Wouldn't do what?" George asked suddenly. "What were you thinking of doing? How do you know what I was thinking?" "Oh, we make it our business to know a lot of things," the stranger said easily. George wondered what the man's business was. He was a most unremarkable person, the sort you would pass in a court and never notice. Unless you saw high bright blue eyes, that is. You couldn't forget him, for they were the kindest, sharpest eyes you ever saw. Nothing else about him was noteworthy. He wore a moth-eaten fur cap and shabby overcoat. He was carrying a small black satchel, a salesman's sample kit, George decided. "Looks like snow, doesn't it?" the stranger said, glancing up appraisingly at the overcast sky. "It'll be nice to have a white Christmas. They're getting scarce these days, but so are a lot of things." He turned to face George squarely. "You all right now?" "Of course I'm all right. What made you think I wasn't?" George fell silent before the stranger's quiet face. The man shook his head. "You know you shouldn't think of such things, and on Christmas Eve of all times. You've got to consider Mary and your mother too." George opened his mouth to ask how this stranger could know his wife's name, but the fellow anticipated him. "Don't ask me how I know such things. It's my business. That's why I came along this way tonight. Luckily I did too." He glanced down at the dark water and shuddered. "Well, if you know so much about me," George said, "give me just one good reason why I should be alive." Come, it can't be that bad. You've got your job at the bank, and Mary and the kids. You're healthy, young, and sick of everything," George cried. "I'm stuck here in this mud hole for life, doing the same fool work day after day. Other men are leading exciting lives, but I'm just a small town bank clerk. I never did anything really useful or interesting, and it looks as if I never will." "Oh, go away." "It looks as if I never will. I might just as well be dead. Sometimes I wish I were. In fact, I wish I had never been born." The man stood looking at him in the growing darkness. What was that you said? He asked softly. I said I wish I'd never been born, George repeated firmly. The stranger's pink cheeks glowed with excitement. Why, that's wonderful. You've solved everything. I was afraid you were going to give me some trouble, but now you've got the solution to yourself. You wish you'd never been born. All right, okay, you haven't. What do you mean? You haven't been born. Just that. No one here knows you. Why, you haven't even a mother. You couldn't have, of course. All your troubles are over. Your wish, I am happy to say, has been granted, officially. Nuts, George snorted and turned away. The stranger caught him by the arm. You'd better take this with you, he said, holding out his satchel. It'll open a lot of doors that might otherwise be slammed in your face. What doors in whose face? I know everybody in this town. Yes, I know, the man said patiently, but take this anyway. It can't do any harm, and it may help. He opened the satchel and displayed a number of brushes. You'd be surprised how useful these brushes can be as introduction, especially the free ones. He held out a plain little hand brush. I'll show you how to use it. He thrust the satchel into George's reluctant hands and began when the lady of the house comes to the door. You give her this and then talk fast. You say, Good evening, madam. I'm from the World Cleaning Company, and I want to present you with this handsome and useful brush absolutely free. No obligation to purchase anything at all. After that, of course, it's a cinch. Now you try it. He forced the brush into George's hand. George promptly dropped the brush into the satchel and closed it with an angry snap. Here, he said, and then stopped abruptly, for there was no one in sight. The stranger must have slipped away into the bushes growing along the river bank, George thought. He certainly wasn't going to play hide and seek with him. It was nearly dark and getting colder. He shivered and turned up his coat collar. The street lights had been turned on, and Christmas candles in the windows glowed softly. The little town looked remarkably cheerful. They did a misspelling there. After all, the place you grew up in was the one spot on earth where you could really feel at home. George felt a sudden burst of affection, even for crotchety old Hank Biddle, whose house he was passing. He remembered the quarrel he had had when his car had scraped a piece of bark out of Hank's big maple tree. George looked up at the vast spread of leafless branches towering over him in the darkness. The tree must have been growing there since Indian times. He felt a sudden twinge of guilt for the damage he had done. He had never stopped to inspect the wound, for he was ordinarily afraid to have Hank catch him even looking at the tree. Now he stepped out boldly into the roadway to examine the huge trunk. Hank must have repaired the scar or painted it over, for there was no sign of it. George struck a match and bent down to look more closely. He straightened up with an odd sinking feeling in his stomach. There wasn't any scar. The bark was smooth and undamaged. He remembered what the little man at the bridge had said. It was all nonsense, of course, but the non-existent scar bothered him. When he reached the bank, he saw that something was wrong. The building was dark, and he knew he had turned the vault light on. He noticed too that someone had left the window shades up. He ran around to the front. There was a battered old sign fastened on the door. George could just make out the words, Rent for sale, apply James Silver, real estate. Perhaps it was some boy's trick, he thought wildly. Then he saw a pile of ancient leaves and tattered newspapers in the bank's ordinarily immaculate doorway, and the windows looked as though they hadn't been washed in years. A light was still burning across the street in Jim Silver's office. George dashed over and tore the door open. Jim looked up from his ledger book in surprise. "What can I do for you, young man?" he said in the polite voice he reserved for potential customers. "The bank," George said breathlessly. "What's the matter with it?" "The old bank building?" Jim Silver turned around and looked out of the window. "Nothing that I can see. Wouldn't like to rent or buy it, would you?" "You mean it's out of business?" "For a good 10 years. Went bust. Stranger around these parts, ain't ya?" George sagged against the wall. "I was here some time ago," he said weakly. "The bank was all right then. I even knew some of the people who worked there." "Didn't you know a fella named Marty Jenkins, did you?" "Marty Jenkins, why he—" George was about to say that Marty had never worked at the bank. Couldn't have, in fact, for when they had both left school, they had applied for a job there and George had gotten it. But now, of course, things were different. He would have to be careful. "No, I didn't know him," he said slowly. "Not really, that is. I'd heard of him." "Then maybe you heard how he skipped out with $50,000. That's why the bank went broke. Pretty near ruined everybody around here." Silver was looking at him sharply. "I was hoping for a minute maybe you'd know where he is. I lost plenty in that crash myself. We'd like to get our hands on Marty Jenkins." "Didn't he have a brother? Seems to me he had a brother named Arthur." "Art? Oh sure, but he's alright. He don't know where his brother went. It's had a terrible effect on him too. Took to drink, he did. It's too bad, and hard on his wife. He married a nice girl." George felt the sinking feeling in his stomach again. "Who did he marry?" he demanded hoarsely. "Both he and Art had courted Mary. Girl named Mary Thatcher," Silver said cheerfully. "She lives up on the hill just this side of the church. Hey, where are you going?" But George had bolted out of the office. He ran past the empty bank building and turned up the hill. For a moment he thought of going straight to Mary. The house next to the church had been given them by her father as a wedding present. Naturally, Art Jenkins would have gotten it if he had married Mary. George wondered whether they had any children. Then he knew he couldn't face Mary. Not yet anyway. He decided to visit his parents and find out more about her. There were candles burning in the windows of the little weather-beaten house on the side street, and a Christmas wreath was hanging on the glass panel of the front door. George raised the gate latch with a loud click. A dark shape on the porch jumped up and began to growl. Then it hurled itself down the steps, barking ferociously. "Brownie!" George shouted. "Brownie, you old fool, stop that! Don't you know me?" But the dog advanced menacingly and drove him back behind the gate. The porch light snapped on and George's father stepped outside to call the dog off. The barking subsided to a low, angry growl. His father held the dog by the collar while George cautiously walked past. He could see that his father did not know him. "Is the lady of the house in?" he asked. His father waved toward the door. "Go on in," he said cordially. "I'll chain this dog up. She can be mean with strangers." His mother, who was waiting in the hallway, obviously did not recognize him. George opened his sample kit and grabbed the first brush that came to hand. "Good evening, ma'am," he said politely. "I'm from the World Cleaning Company. We're giving out a free sample brush. I thought you might like to have one. No obligation. No obligation at all, his voice faltered. His mother smiled at his awkwardness. I suppose you'll want to sell me something. I'm not really sure I need any brushes. No, I'm not selling anything, he assured her. The regular salesman will be around in a few days. This is just a Christmas present from the company. How nice, she said. You people never gave away such good brushes before. This is a special offer, he said. His father entered the hall and closed the door. Won't you come in for a while and sit down? His mother said. You must be tired walking so much. Thank you, ma'am. I don't mind if I do. He entered the little parlour and put his bag down on the floor. The room looked different somehow, although he could not figure out why. I used to know this town pretty well, he said to make conversation. Knew some of the townspeople. I remember a girl named Mary Thatcher. She married Art Jenkins, I heard. You must know them. Of course, his mother said. We know Mary well. Any children? He asked casually. 2, a boy and a girl. George sighed audibly. My, you must be tired, his mother said. Perhaps I can get you a cup of tea? No, don't bother, he said. I'll be having supper soon. He looked around the little parlour, trying to find out why it looked different. Over the mantelpiece hung a framed photograph which had been taken on his kid brother Harry's 16th birthday. He remembered how they had gone to Potter's studio to be photographed together. There was something queer about the picture. It showed only one figure, Harry's. Is that your son? He asked. His mother's face clouded. She nodded but said nothing. I think I met him too, George said hesitantly. His name's Harry, isn't it? His mother turned away, making a strange choking noise in her throat. Her husband put his arm clumsily around her shoulder. His voice, which was always mild and gentle, suddenly became harsh. You couldn't have met him, he said. He's been dead a long while. He was drowned the day that picture was taken. George's mind flew back to the long ago August afternoon when he and Harry had visited Potter's studio. On their way home they had gone swimming. Harry had been seized with a cramp, he remembered. He had pulled him out of the water and had thought nothing of it. But suppose he hadn't been there. I'm sorry, he said miserably. I guess I'd better go. I hope you like the brush, and I wish you both a very Merry Christmas. There he had put his foot in it again, wishing them a Merry Christmas when they were thinking about their dead son. Brownie tugged fiercely at her chain as George went down the porch steps and accompanied his departure with a hostile rolling growl. He wanted desperately now to see Mary. He wasn't sure he could stand not being recognised by her, but he had to see her. The lights were on in the church and the choir was making last-minute preparations for Christmas Vespers. The organ had been practising Holy Night evening after evening until George had become thoroughly sick of it. But now the music almost tore his heart out. He stumbled blindly up the path to his own house. The lawn was untidy, and the flower bushes he had kept carefully trimmed were neglected and badly sprouted. Art Jenkins could hardly be expected to care for such things. When he knocked at the door, there was a long silence, followed by the shout of a child. Then Mary came to the door. At the sight of her, George's voice almost failed him. Merry Christmas, ma'am, he managed to say at last. His hand shook as he tried to open the satchel. When George entered the living room, unhappy as she was, he could not help noticing with a secret grin that the 2 high-priced blue sofa they often had quarrelled over was there. Evidently Mary had gone through the same thing with Art Jenkins and had won the argument with him too. George got his satchel open. One of the brushes had a bright blue handle with the vari-coloured bristles. blue-handled and vari-coloured bristles. It was obviously a brush not intended to be given away, but George didn't care. He handed it to Mary. "This would be fine for your sofa," he said. "My, that's a pretty brush," she exclaimed. "You're giving it away free?" He nodded solemnly. "Special introductory offer. It's one way for the company to keep excess profits down. Share them with its friends." She stroked the sofa gently with the brush, smoothing out the velvety nap. "It is a nice brush. Thank you, There was a sudden scream from the kitchen, and two small children rushed in. A little homely-faced girl flung herself into her mother's arms, sobbing loudly as a boy of 7 came running after her, snapping a toy pistol at her head. "Mummy, she won't die," he yelled. "I shot her 100 times, but she won't die." He looks just like Art Jenkins, George thought. Acts like him too. The boy suddenly turned his attention to him. "Who are you?" he demanded belligerently. He pointed his pistol at George and pulled the trigger. "You're dead," he cried. "You're dead. Why don't you fall down and die?" There was a heavy step on the porch. The boy looked frightened and backed away. George saw Mary glance apprehensively at the door. Art Jenkins came in. He stood for a moment in the doorway, clinging to the knob for support. His eyes were glazed, and his face was very red. "Who's this?" he demanded thickly. "He's a brush salesman," Mary tried to explain. "He gave me this brush." "Brush salesman?" Art sneered. "Well, tell him to get out of here. We don't want no brushes." Art hiccuped violently and lurched across the room to the sofa, where he sat down suddenly. "And we don't want no brush salesman neither." Neither. Whichever way you want to pronounce it, doesn't matter. Anyway, George looked despairingly at Mary. Her eyes were begging him to go. Art had lifted his feet up on the sofa and was sprawling out on it, muttering unkind things about brush salesmen. George went to the door, followed by Art's son, who kept snapping the pistol at him, saying, "You're dead, dead, dead." Perhaps the boy was right, George thought when he reached the porch. Maybe he was dead, or maybe this was all a bad dream from which he might eventually awake. He wanted to find the little man on the bridge again and try to persuade him to cancel the whole deal. He hurried down the hill and broke into a run when he neared the river. George was relieved to see the little stranger standing on the bridge. "I've had enough," he gasped. "Get me out of this. You got me into it." The stranger raised his eyebrows. "I got you into it? I like that. You were granted your wish. You got everything you asked for. You're the freest man on earth now. You have no ties. You can go anywhere, do anything. What more can you possibly want? Change me back," George pleaded. "Change me back, please. Not just for my sake, but for others too. You don't know what a mess this town is in. You don't understand. I've got to get back. They need me here." "I understand right enough," the stranger said slowly. "I just wanted to make sure you did. You had the greatest gift of all conferred upon you. The gift of life, of being a part of this world and taking a part in it, yet you denied that gift." As the stranger spoke, the church bell high up on the hill sounded, calling the townspeople to Christmas vespers. Then the downtown church bell started ringing. "I've got to get back," George said desperately. "You can't cut me off like this. Why, it's murder." "Suicide, rather, wouldn't you say?" the stranger murmured. "You brought it on yourself. However, since it's Christmas Eve, well, anyway, close your eyes and keep listening to the bells." His voice sank lower. "Keep listening to the bells." George did as he was told. He felt a cold, wet snowdrop touch his cheek, and then another, and another. When he opened his eyes, the snow was falling fast, so fast that it obscured everything around him. The little stranger could not be seen, but then neither could anything else. The snow was so thick that George had to grope for the bridge railing. As he started toward the village, he thought he heard someone saying Merry Christmas, but the bells were drowning out all rival sounds, so he could not be sure. When he reached Hank Biddle's house, he stopped and walked out into the roadway, peering down anxiously at the base of the big maple tree. The scar was there, thank heaven. He touched the tree affectionately. He'd have to do something about the wound, get a tree surgeon or something. Anyway, he'd evidently been changed back. He was himself again. Maybe it was all a dream, or perhaps he had been hypnotized by the smooth flowing black water. He had heard of such things. At the corner of Main and Bridge Streets, he almost collided with a hurrying figure. It was Jim Silver, the real estate agent. "Hello, George," Jim said cheerfully. "Late tonight, ain't you? I should think you'd want to be home early on Christmas Eve." George drew a long breath. "I just wanted to see if the bank is all right. I've got to make sure the vault light is on." "Sure it's on. I saw it as I went past." "Let's look, huh?" George said, pulling at Silver's sleeve. He wanted the assurance of a witness. He dragged the surprised real estate dealer around to the front of the bank where the light was gleaming through the falling snow. "I told you it was on," Silver said with some irritation. "I had to make sure," George mumbled. "Thanks, and Merry Christmas." Then he was off like a streak, running up the hill. He was in a hurry to get home, but not in such a hurry that he couldn't stop for a moment at his parents' house, where he wrestled with Brownie until the friendly old bulldog waggled all over with delight. He grasped his startled brother's hand and wrung it frantically, wishing him an almost hysterical Merry Christmas. Then he dashed across the parlour to examine a certain photograph. He kissed his mother, joked with his father, and was out of the house a few seconds later, stumbling and slipping on the newly fallen snow as he ran up on the hill. The church was bright with light, and the choir and the organ were going full tilt. George flung the door to his home open and called out at the top of his voice, "Mary, where are you? Mary, kids!" His wife came toward him, dressed for going to church and making gestures to silence him. "I've just put the children to bed," she protested. "Now they'll—" But not another word could she get out of her mouth, for he smothered it with kisses, and then dragged her up to the children's room, where he violated every tenet of parental behaviour by madly embracing his son and his daughter and waking them up thoroughly. It was not until Mary got him downstairs that he began to be coherent. "I thought I'd lost you. Oh, Mary, I thought I'd lost you. What's the matter, darling?" she asked in bewilderment. He pulled her down on the sofa and kissed her again, and then, just as he was about to tell her about his queer dream, his fingers came in contact with something lying on the seat of the sofa. His voice froze. He did not even have to pick the thing up, for he knew what it was, and he knew that it would have a blue handle with vari-coloured bristles. The end. And hi Timothy Coyne, hi London. I hope you enjoyed that. I will have to end the stream early. I will hopefully do it again tomorrow or sometime later this week. But yeah, I'm very sorry for the technical difficulties in the beginning. So what I'm going to do, I'm streaming both on YouTube and Twitch, so I think I'm going to raid somebody on Twitch. Don't know who you think I should raid, the ones who are on Twitch. Excuse me. Fungi is on. Okay then, I can raid Fungi Media. I hope those on YouTube, you take care and Merry Christmas. And Scammy Santa is on. You're welcome, Rosa Edge. I think what I'll do, 1 minute, I'll create a poll. Just give me a moment, everybody. Right, let's see. Just getting the names. So it won't take me any longer. Okay, I think that is it. Thank you. Ichiro Zuri made that for me. He's a great friend of mine who I've known many years on DeviantArt. Okay, I'll give it 2 minutes. There we go. The poll should be ready for everyone. Just have a sip of water. Take care, Rosa. Right, 1 vote for Fungi. Okay. Any other votes? From, other people who they wish to we wish to raid. Just one who voted. Yeah, seems to just be one vote. Okay, only one vote, so we'll raid Fungi Media. Who's the only one that got voted anyway. Alright. Thank you all so much for joining my Christmas storytelling stream. I'll do it again sometime later this week. Right, now. You're very welcome. Right. So yeah, you all take care. I will see you again soon this week for more Christmas storytelling streams. So Merry Christmas.